A very good morning to all of you and welcome back to the channel. So today let's start with the analysis session for 8th of July 2023. So starting off with the important topics for today. So ED attaches assets worth rupees 52 crores of Manish Sisodia and others in the Delhi Excise Police case. So this case has been going on and investigation continues. So ED has provisionally attached the assets belonging to the former Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi. So taking up one of the case studies for GS4 ethics, we see that Coimbatore DIG Vijay Kumar ends life. So he was taking treatment for depression and OCD for some years. So yes, we know about the pressure, the everyday life pressure that the officials they have to go through. So do we need to include such a training that even focuses upon how to handle everyday life's pressure so that they don't have to suffer from depression? So the Deputy Inspector General of Police allegedly died by suicide at his camp office. Then another train accident where we see that five coaches of the Falaknuma Express catches fire, but none is hurt. So why of late we are seeing that number of cases, or we can say accidents related to the trains, that is going up. So definitely we know that after what happened in Odisha, the train safety and the passenger safety, it has become a cause of concern. And this we have discussed this topic objectively, that what are the faults in the current signaling system that is majorly responsible for these accidents, and what more needs to be done, what the government is pondering about including more things in the forms of technology so as to increase the safety of trains in India. Coming to the editorial page, so this article is talking about India-US relations. So the sobriety after the euphoria of the US state visit, the Indian Prime Minister. So we saw how things went over the focus areas of the visit. And we've also covered few articles where we comparison like the situations when basically India was under a challenging situation because of USA, and few areas where USA and India they collaborated, they cooperated in terms of again challenging times. So these aspects were also taken up before we talked about the civil nuclear deal and Indian visits then and now. What is the difference? So every Indian prime minister is of course entitled to his or her place in the sun, but a good visit to the US by an Indian prime minister is generally viewed as one clear index of India's standing in the comity of nations. So that's why we always have an eye about how basically things are going forward. So while India cannot be the kind of ally that American wants, New Delhi must use the outcome of the Prime Minister's successful state visit to skillfully function as a bridge power. So we can basically act as a bridge between the conflicting parties in the Indo-Pacific, in West Asia, and in Europe. And this could be the enduring legacy of the Prime Minister's latest visit to the US, which has occasioned so much of interest, not only in US and India, but across the world. It is for India to seize the moment and play its rightful role. So the long road to finding true peace in Yemen. So obviously we know about the situation which is going on in Yemen, and we saw few developments when we saw the restoration of the diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and that was achieved basically through a deal brokered through China. So we expected that there will be some progress in the situation in Yemen. So in April this year, just as the Saudi-led war in Yemen, it completed 8 years, a diplomatic delegation from the kingdom reached Sana'a airport for talks with its Houthi enemies. So some details of the talks they soon became public as well, like building on the year-long ceasefire. The two sides they agreed to 6 months truce to be followed by talks over 3 months to agree on a 2-year transition period when the details of the Yemeni state that would emerge after the war would be finalized. So death and destruction in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, which is a leading coalition of some Arab forces, it had initially military operations on March 26, 2015, to prevent Houthis, which is a Shia militia representing the marginalized Zaidi community. And it basically Houthis, they have aligned with Iran, and Saudi Arabia is in opposition of Houthis. So that is the position the two countries in this war. And we saw that the war it has ground to a stalemate with the Houthis controlling the capital, that is Sana'a, and the principal port, that is Hodeidah. So you need to locate the location, basically you need to locate this port on map. And the coalition it controls the sea, the sky, and large parts of the south, so thus preventing essential food, medical, and energy supplies from reaching the population. So, given the estimated expenditure of about $60 billion in the 8-year conflict, Saudi Arabia it has been anxious to obtain a face-saving exit from this war. So, as I just mentioned about the Saudi-Iran accord, which was brokered by China in March, provided this opportunity. And there are reports that Iran it has also agreed to curtail the military supplies to Houthis and facilitate a peace process in Yemen. So what has been achieved so far is the exchange of prisoners and easing of the blockade on Sana'a and Hodeidah port, and humanitarian aid it has come in, and flights they have taken Yemeni pilgrims including Houthi leaders to Mecca for Hajj. Now, what are the challenges to the peace process going forward? So, challenges coming in the way of the peace process, it includes Houthi insistence that the kingdom pay the salaries of all the government officials, including the armed forces personnel, for the last few years from the Yemen's oil revenues. And Saudis, they are hardly enthusiastic about funding their former enemies. So Houthis, they're also seeking compensation from the Saudis for the war damage that has been done so far. And the later they are willing to consider contributing to reconstruction, but balk at the idea of compensation. So Houthis are also reluctant to engage with the 8-member Saudi-supported Presidential Leadership Council. So these are some of the challenges. And apart from this, we expect that since the diplomatic relations have been restored between Saudi Arabia and Iran, we expect more peace going forward in Yemen. So the infinite variety of customs that exists in India, and for which obviously we are known, as we say, that India is known for unity in diversity. So when we talk about the UCC, that is the Uniform Civil Code, obviously, tribal community is at apprehension because of, uh, obviously, if UCC is implemented, then it will have to give up its customs and traditions that they have followed since ages. So Prime Minister's push for a uniform civil code, it has led to alarm among the tribal communities in different regions of the country. So basically, whether it is from northeastern states, from Jharkhand, they are worried about their customs and age-old practices, which is recognized by law, and that would be soon under threat because of UCC. So obviously it will be tinkering with the way of life of the tribal community. So tribal villages, they fear that significant parts of their way of life that would be undone if a UCC is put in place. So that is one area where we expect, or where we can expect, some kind of exception going forward, because obviously we have special laws and even constitutional provisions in order to deal with the welfare of the tribal communities. So we cannot let our traditional system be affected by a common code that is likely to be drafted on the basis of practices of majority patriarchal society. So that is one of the views of the chief executive member of the Khasi Hills Autonomous District Council. Then an advocate says that if a UCC is put in place, there will be significant doubt cast on many judgments that have recognized the customary practices of these communities, and more broadly, all law is based on some custom or the other. So, what will happen to that principle? So, these are some of the things, few areas which needs to be thought about going forward as far as UCC is concerned. So words like fake, false, misleading in the IT rules are problematic. So Bombay High Court expressed concern about the authority conferred on fact-checking unit, and it said that was like fake, false, and misleading that are part of the new IT rules. They were problematic. So these were recently issued guidelines, or the code we can say, as far as IT Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Amendment Rules 2023 is concerned. So these new rules, they require the social media intermediaries to censor or otherwise modify the content that relates to the union government if the government mandated fact-checking unit directs them to do so. So this was a recent change, and again, there were like a lot of debates around this thing about basically how you'll be identified something as fails, fake, false, and misleading. So these are some, basically it included some ambiguity areas. So McDonald's stores, they put the tomato off the menu amid the price rise. So you can see the impact in different forms. So fast food chain McDonald's has stopped using tomato in its food preparations at most of the stores in northern and the eastern parts of the country, citing the non-availability of the quality products amid the price of the commodity surging up to rupees 200 per kg. So we need to focus upon sustainable agriculture in order to ensure that such incidences, because we say that obviously they're seasonal in nature, they're not repeated going forward. So due to the seasonal crop issues arising out of the farm fields in a few regions, you see there are not enough good quality tomatoes available. And this we've shown that there's supply crunch because of impact of virus on the tomato cultivation. So Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank says internal review found no evidence of the China influence. So the China-based Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank said that there was no evidence it was dominated by Beijing's ruling Communist Party, as it released a review into the explosive claims made by a former executive. And since we know that it is China which holds the maximum amount of share in the bank, followed by India, and it is headquartered in Beijing. So official had resigned from the position last month, saying that it serves China's interests. So it's from then that it became a concern, and a proper inquiry was conducted, but we've come to the conclusion that no evidence was found of basically that bank is functioning according to China's whims and fancies. Further, you can see when we talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, so US is going to send cluster bombs and armored vehicles to Ukraine. So bombs, they will come from the Pentagon's stocks, and decision comes despite the widespread concerns that the munitions can cause the civilian casualties and spark the call from the UN to avoid using them. And at the same time, the major thing that we're focusing upon right now, or the major development in this war is around possibility of it further escalating in the form of a nuclear war. So cluster munitions, they are a part of the new military aid package worth close to $800 million for Ukraine. So PM Gati Shakti, you need to know about what it is actually about. So government is going to share the data about it. So industry and the potential investors, they will have access to the infrastructure data, which is captured in the PM Gati Shakti platform, according to top government officials, and the data sharing to be compatible with the policies of the science and electronics and IT ministries. So that would be basically forming a part of the investment decisions, and obviously would be helping the industrialists in taking the decisions. So center is planning to allow the industry and investors to tap into data collected under the PM Gati Shakti master plan. So there are multiple layers of geospatial data from across the country which is available on this platform. And Gati Shakti's network planning group has so far evaluated 85 large central infrastructure projects. So when we talk about the issue of project delays, which obviously leads to cost overruns, we are trying to avoid that. But right now, as per the data, we see that maximum number of such instances and incidences getting basically we're encountering more them in the um you can say highways development projects. So the network planning group under the platform, which has multiple layers of geospatial data from across the country, has so far managed to evaluate and facilitate 85 large central infrastructure projects worth nearly rupees 5 lakh crores so far. So geospatial data sharing, it has to be compatible with the Science Ministry's policy with the Ministry of Electronics and IT. It has been asked to examine issues related to data protection and privacy, and all ministries, they're working out what data can be shared. So when we talk about the economic situation in the US, so we see that jobs gain that is slow and wage rise to spur the Fed hike further. So this is a very clear expectations going forward that US Fed, which is the central bank of US, would be increasing the policy rate. And again, we have also talked about the linkage of this decision with the decision which is taken by RBI, and obviously the impact of the decision of the US Fed on the Indian capitals market. So US, it added around 209,000 payroll jobs in June, which is fewer than anticipated. So we basically in the employment sector, we are seeing a slowdown that that can be one of the possible reasons of the rate hike and wage rises. So that's going to be another factor. So economy is still adding more jobs than new entrants to the labor market. And apart from this, they have the exact target of inflation at 2%. So that is obviously because of the size of the US economy. The target level is 2%. In case of India, it is at 4%. So almost half of the workers in India, they do not feel secure in jobs. So that's according to a survey. So firstly, we need to know about the sample size. So job insecurity, it is growing concern for workers worldwide. And in India, 47% of the employees, they do not feel secure in their positions. So they feel basically they're concerned about the volatility and the uncertain economic times, especially in the light of the recent report of the large scale job losses at prominent corporations and the alleged threat of technologies like AI to the human employment. So the sample size was 32,000 workers, which are half of Generation Z that we call about, which is in the age group of 18 to 24, said that they did not feel secure in their jobs. Coming to Financial Express newspaper, so here we see unlisted stocks, they see their own bull rally. So stock market is basically making, or it is hitting all-time high. So the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, it seeks views on the communication apps. So basically these apps, obviously they are based on internet, and you can basically access the caller services via these apps. So the TRI, it's started the process to examine the issue of regulating the OTT communication apps like WhatsApp, Facebook. And while the telecom regulator, it has sought stakeholders' comments on this issue, such as the definition of these OTT apps, their licensing, their privacy and security. And it has also brought in the issue of selective banning of the OTT services in the event of law and order problem against the present practice of the shutting down of complete internet services in a region. So instead of going for the internet shutdown, the regulators think that they can go forward with banning these apps for a short time period if there is a situation of law and order problem, and they are basically trying to widen their ambit of regulation by bringing these OTT apps under it. Talking about sustainable practices, so the global average rate of the plastic recycling, it is just 9%. Some of the developed economy, it has as low as 4%, but in India, it outshines at 13% of our plastic is being recycled. So we would like to see this number grow exponentially in the future. So here, terms like the circular economy or upcycling, that becomes important. So you need to have clarity about circular economy. Here we're talking about plastic recycling. And then a few days back, I remember that we also talked about the alternatives to plastics. So sustainable alternatives, I should say. And that was again from Financial Express only. So that was very, very important thing. So green hydrogen mission, green hydrogen, that's very, very important topic these days because we are talking about the green energy transition plans, how we'll be going about it, and how basically we are that, trying to push the adoption of green hydrogen in terms of green fuel and plans of for 100% green hydrogen rule for the key industries, how it can be used in industries. So enabling provision for the mandatory green hydrogen use included in the Energy Conservation Act in the amendment that was done in December last year. Pilot projects underway to assess the commercial feasibility and the industry readiness. That do they have actually that much capabilities right now or the technology that they can start using clean hydrogen in the industries. So industries covered many uh, it may include like fertilizers industry, petroleum refineries, long haul mobility, steel and shipping. So even the global interest in India's clean energy that's increasing because the global demand for the green hydrogen it will reach 200 million ton by 2030. So here India definitely it can play an important role. And when we talk about the European Investment Bank, that will be our hydrogen ally and it will support the development large scale industry hub with a funding of 1 billion euro. So Air India clears the deck for next phase of Vihan.ai. So Tata Group control the Air India. It will reveal a new brand identity, inducted India's first Airbus A350, and take a call on premium cabin seat operations in the coming months as it gets closer to launching the next phase of its business plan. So we are seeing India's civil aviation sector is growing. New orders in massive quantities have been placed. And then we also talk about the concerns related to the prices of the air tickets going forward, and even government is doing things about having a proper formula in order to calculate the ticket prices so that obviously they are not merely changed according to the whims and fancies of different aircraft companies, and at the same time we're able to ensure that consumer interest that's not violated and they're not heavily charged. Coming to Indian Express newspaper, so let's see important topics for today. Viksit or Adhyatmik Bharat. So Prime Minister, you can see he's on a visit in UP at the Gita Press in Gorakhpur. And the Prime Minister also launched development projects in Raipur and Varanasi. So 10 military lessons from the Ukraine conflict for India. So let's understand them and what needs to be adopted going forward, what needs to be avoided. Definitely, we can't ignore these things. So no two wars they are alike, and studying the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict may, however, offer some insights as to its changing nature, the impact of new technologies, and new dimensions of the strategy. So the first lesson is unstable deterrence appended by the big power geopolitical conflict is inherently escalatory. So this is the first lesson. So how well Russia fares on this battlefield remains key to the fate of Ukraine as an independent state and the future of NATO as well. Given the high stakes, all parties to the conflict, they are in the escalation mode right now with its consequential, deeply worrying risks. So short of the membership, NATO may double down on supporting Ukraine as well. Second is prolonged wars are more than stalemated wars due to their escalated aims. So, for some in our expert community, long used to analyzing the American wars fought in easy combat environments, Russia's ability to defy the numerous predictions of its defeat has come as a surprise. Thirdly, prolonged wars, they require a steady hand on the battlefield and a stable domestic front. Fourth is battlefield and the political resilience. They are two sides of the same coin. Battlefield and political resilience. So, despite the military setbacks of the last year, Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Kherson, to regroup and refit well enough to turn the military tide in their favor, Russian forces in Donbass, they have been like a coconut grater decimating the oncoming Ukrainian offensives, are showing good fighting armies. They're also good learning armies. So that's a good sentence. Good fighting armies are also good learning armies. So here at the political front, there's strategic patience on the part of political leadership and the strategic coherence of the military go hand in hand. Fifth is the prolonged wars. They are wars of reserves, of political will, military capacity, and reserves, civilian industry fusion, industrial logistics, fresh and rotated manpower, and role of paramilitaries. So Russian army's industry that has bounced back because of this war, and its arsenal now has some of the best battle-tested equipment globally. So maintaining message consistency is critical to maintaining the morale, and Russia has gradually gained the upper hand despite massive Western media support for Ukraine. Then sixth is wars. They are not linear but overlapping in the lineage. So Ukraine conflict in 21st century war intersecting with the 20th century use of artillery and dug-in defense. However, in other respects, in the clash of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, assets, what in essence is a direct clash between Russian and the NATO systems. So it's harbinger of things to come. And seventh is the ugly child of the ISR revolution is the naked battlefield, desorped of effective camouflage for deployed forces or even attacking forces, as Ukraine is learning the hard way due to the relentless stare of visual, infrared, and electronic sensors carried by drones, aircrafts, and space assets. Then we see increased use of AI and the quantum computing that would compress the combat engagement windows from hours to minutes. And war can also take the form of cyber war or space war in the electromagnetic spectrum that can be misused, or even the threat of eco warfare. So that is the new emerging dimensions. Eighth is the democratization of combat information. It will generate pressures for decentralization of the firepower, even as low as the platoon level. Ninth is the appeal of technology is universal, but its application is doctrine specific. So by adapting technology to its doctrinal needs, Russia, it secured the battlefield gains, while Ukraine, it has been caught midstream between its own doctrine and that imported from NATO. And finally, India's quiet military revolution in terms of changes to the higher defense management, in terms of procurement and recruitment, as well as on operational principles of jointness, integration, and theaterization that will greatly benefit our armed forces. So we would do well to learn, unlearn, and relearn not only the lessons of the past wars, but more importantly, study the current global trends for lessons which are relevant for our future challenges. So independence in thought and action in matters of war and peace is, after all, the true meaning of the strategic autonomy, and for our defense reform process, it's true litmus test going forward. So that's an important thing. All important things have been mentioned in this last para. Coming to the explained page, so an important topic, China's slowing economy, and obviously that will be having an impact on the global economy as well. So last year, China's GDP growth fell below the global average for the first time in decades, and the yuan, it has been losing ground to the dollar since beginning of the 2023, and key indicators suggest a faltering economy of China. So here we have the data about their exchange rate for the Chinese yuan versus USD. So you can see that it has been depreciating, and then it appreciated further and then depreciated at this level. So you need to know about the linkage between depreciation and its impact on the exports. That's one important area when we talk about the exchange rate changes. So, United States Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen criticized China's unfair economic practices. And as she is on a visit to China, so she said that she was particularly troubled by the punitive actions that have been taken against US firms in recent months. So she said that US does not want a wholesale separation of our economies and seeks to diversify and not decouple from China. So this was basically a reiteration. A new Chinese law that has come into effect at the beginning of this month provides a legal framework for policymakers in Beijing to respond to the export bans which are imposed by the US. So we know about the trade war which has been going on between US and China. So what key metrics tell about the Chinese economy and their state of economy? So youth unemployment in the urban areas. So this metric, which looks at unemployment among those aged between 16 to 24, has been 3 to 4 times the overall unemployment level. So that's one area, whatever like uh, demographic advantages China can reap off, it is unable to do because of, you can see the high level of unemployment amongst the youth. Then growth in the industrial output. So at the beginning of this year, there was hope that China was starting to pick up the growth momentum, but this was crucial for both the global growth and growth in Asian countries. But momentum seems to have faltered in the month of May. So this is another indicator of slowing down of the Chinese economy. Then thirdly, growth rate of investment in the fixed assets, which you're talking about capital expenditure. So even basically China is faltering at this level. Then growth rate of the retail sales by consumers. So world trade falters as we are seeing that the global demand that is slowing down. So Chinese policymakers, they have been trying to transform their economy into one that runs more and more on the domestic consumers. But again, even domestically, the demand is faltering. Then the growth rate of exports. So obviously that is also impacted by the global economy, the current situation. And then growth rate of imports. So most growing economies with the robust domestic demand, they tend to import more or less. They try to import more and not less. So here the data shows that imports have contracted more often than not in China. So that is also one pointer towards weak domestic demand. Then purchasing managers index in the manufacturing sector. So this trend is also used for international comparisons while monitoring the macroeconomic developments. So here we see that it has been showing that again the recovery is very slow, or as we were expecting it to be very strong. So it didn't turn out to be that way. So what is this outlook? These all these indicator it points towards. So the Chinese authorities, they have so far only tinkered with the interest rates, but most analysts, they believe country's economy needs a fiscal stimulus also. So it is not, just only that monetary policy can help or the fiscal policy can help. Both they need to work simultaneously in order to actually concern the root cause of the thing that is majorly impacting the economy. So you need to take both the supply side measures and the demand side measures. So the brain-eating amoeba that has killed a teenager in Kerala. So infection, it is caused by the Nigleria fowleri, or it is called the brain-eating amoeba. So the single cell organism, it can be seen only under a microscope, and it is found in warm freshwater environments such as lakes, rivers, and springs. So it survives on the bacteria and sediment in the lakes and rivers. So in very rare cases, it has been found even in swimming pools and water bodies in the entertainment parks. So it enters the body through the nose and travels to the brain, and then further dividing or jumping into the river or lake can force the water up the nose. So this infection leads to severe and usually fatal brain infection, which is known as the primary amoebic uh, meningoencephalitis. So talking about its prevention treatment, so infection does not spread from person to person. And preventive measures such as avoiding the warm freshwater bodies with inadequate chlorination, using nose clips, and using sterile water for the nasal cleansing rituals can help reduce the risk of contracting this infection. So standing up for national anthem, what the Supreme Court has ruled on this. So an executive magistrate in Srinagar has sent 11 men to jail after they were detained for allegedly not rising for the national anthem at an event on 25th of June, where Jammu and Kashmir LG, he was present. So sections of the law. So we have section 107 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, which allows an executive magistrate to ask any person who is likely to commit a breach of the peace or disturb the public tranquility or to do any wrongful act that may probably occasion a breach of the peace or disturb the public tranquility to show cause why he should not be ordered to execute a bond for keeping the peace for up to a year. So these are different sections. Here it is also talking about section 151 of CRPC that allows a police officer who knows of a design to commit a cognizable offense to arrest without orders from magistrate and also even without a warrant. So the law around this alleged disrespect to the national anthem, it was laid down by Supreme Court in 1986 judgment in Bijoy Emmanuel versus the state of Kerala. So court granted protection to three children belonging to the millenarian Christian sect who did not join in the singing of national anthem at their school. So the court held that forcing them to sing the anthem violated their fundamental right to religion under Article 25. So this was one judgment that it leads to violation of your fundamental right under Article 25. Basically, if the element of force is included. So standing up respectfully when the national anthem is sung, but not singing oneself does not either prevent the singing of the national anthem or it can like cause disturbance to an assembly engaged in such singing so as to constitute the offense. So that's one area. So This debate, it has been now recently revisited in 2018 under this Sham Narayan Choksi case. So while hearing this case, the court, it had passed an interim order that all the cinema halls in India, they shall play the national anthem before the feature films they start, and all present in the hall, they are obliged to stand up to show respect to the national anthem. And court, it had also ordered that entry and exit doors, they shall remain closed when the anthem is played, and that when national anthem shall be played, it shall be with the national flag on the screen. And then this order was basically amended further, that to the extent that playing of the national anthem prior to the screening of the feature films in cinema halls is not mandatory, but it is optional or directory. So it's all about the element of forces present or not. So even now, you can see that NATO pledges entry to Ukraine and Zelensky drums up the bid support. So whether Ukraine will be joining NATO, then again, further this war, it can escalate. So we have already taken up all these issues on the economy page. So RBI is working on fintech regulations as the deputy governor of RBI. So it's working on the regulations for financial technology companies, and it's in consultation with the industry for the same. And there are no fintech regulations right now which exist, and we are talking to the industry and understanding whether there is a need to regulate them or not. So we cannot give a timeline at the moment, but it will come only after consultation with them. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us in this analysis session. And I hope things and the topics that we took up today are clear to you. And do subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and also hit the like button for this video. Thank you so much.